Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this is the 2022 MG ZS EV. MG are on a roll right now, and it looks like nobody is going to be able to stop them because they're producing the one thing that everyone's after, particularly in this current climate, the affordable electric vehicle. And they've even got two to choose from with the MG5 Estate and this, the ZS SUV EV. Now, just like its internal combustion engine brother, this EV has gone for a midlife facelift. And yes, as you can see, the styling has definitely changed, but more importantly, underneath are where some of the big changes are, because now we have an affordable EV that has a range of up to 273 miles, which is pretty impressive. So I've had this revised ZS EV extended range version for a week, and I'm going to let you know, well, if it's still the affordable EV that we're all loving and after. Now, when it comes to the ZS EV styling, I actually think it looks really good, and just like its ICE brother, we've got the new headlights and taillights, we've got the revised front and rear grills. However, unlike its ICE brother, we've actually got a filled-in grille, so this finally looks like an electric vehicle. Now, I think it doesn't look too bad, but I know there are some people out there that don't like the new EV's looks. But MG have thought of this, and they've actually come out with an accessory grille that you can fit over the top of this fake one. So your ZS EV can actually look like it has a petrol engine under the bonnet. Don't know why you'd want to have that. I'd like to let everyone know that I've got the EV version, but that's just me. Also, what I like is the revised 17-inch alloy wheels, and in fact, they look a little bit bigger than the ones that we saw on the first generation, and I think that's the fact that they got that blade effect to them, so they actually look like they fill the arch a little bit better. But still, being 17 inches, you can tell that MG are focusing on ride comfort rather than sportiness. Now, the one thing I'm a little bit kind of puzzled with is actually the location of the charging socket, which is no longer under the MG badge. It's just offset here to the side. And of course, just like the MG5 or the revised MG5 from last year, you can now have 100 kilowatt charging on your ZS EV, which is really handy. But what I really love as well is with that charging socket is that it opens sideways, not upwards, so you can see where the socket is, and it makes it easier to charge, especially in low light conditions. That was something I didn't really like with the first generation. But all in all, especially in this Battersea Blue, I really do love the look of the revised MG ZS EV, but let me know what you think in the comments section below. And on that note, I think it's time we stop looking at the exterior of this little funky SUV. Let's see what they've done to that interior. Sat in the front of the ZS EV, you are greeted by a very comfortable, nicely laid out and actually very well kitted interior. You do feel like you're getting a lot of car for your money. Now, because this is a small to medium sized SUV and with a raised driving position, it does mean that getting in and out of the ZS is really easy. So if you have got any kind of mobility issues and you are after an affordable EV, then the ZS should definitely be one to look at. Now, once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that these seats are very comfortable. They do hold a big bear like me in place, but I would just like a little bit more support. However, for the price, I've got no complaints. Now, this being the Trophy Connect, I have got electrically adjustable front driver's seat, but I haven't got any lumbar support. But you can't quite get the perfect driving position because just like the previous generation ZS, the steering has rake adjustment, but no reach. So I do find myself kind of reaching a little bit further than I would be comfortable with in any other car, but you do very quickly get used to it. Interior quality in the ZS is actually a step upwards as well. It seems to be that every time I get to drive a ZS, there's a little bit less hard, scratchy plastics on display. So on top of the dash, we have got some squidgy soft plastic. We have got leatherette trim here on the dash and on the other side as well. Yes, the top of the doors are hard, scratchy plastic, but we have got leather here on the door panel. We've also got leather here on the center console, and it's here on the other side as well, so it's really nice to rest your knee against when you're on a long journey. And then we've got a little bit again of leather trim here on the side of the cup holders and on top of the armrest. So it does feel every time I get into a new ZS that they're listening to their customer base and they're trying to get that premium feel into the ZS. And again, it just makes you feel like you are driving a car that's more expensive than what it actually is. Now, one of the big features I do like in this new ZS is the 10.1-inch infotainment screen, and it does stand out when you're sat in the front because it just looks so much more premium than the previous generation system. Now, yes, that had a massive screen and you had Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it just felt like some of the animations and some of the colorings, if you will, were just a little bit budget. But this just feels much more premium. It's much more responsive to the touch. The only complaint I would have is that some of the icons are quite small and a bit fiddly to use when you're driving, particularly things like the climate control. But that's just a minor niggle, and if you own a Peugeot, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But just underneath we have got some shortcut buttons which are very handy, and again you have got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But the system is just much quicker to use, especially when you're kind of static. But things like switching on the sat-nav from basically from a cold start is actually much quicker than before. You don't feel like you have to go through a 30-second loading process. So that's just something I just want to very quickly mention about one of the highlights of this interior. Now, when it comes to cubby spaces, well, it's also very good in the ZS as well. We've got some very decent sized door pockets where we can get some medium to large sized bottles of drink in there, but they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. But again, for the cost, I'm not complaining. Now we have got one of the highlights here, which is in front of the gear select, where we actually have a wireless charging pad. We've got a USB-A and a USB-C charging input, as well as a 12-volt socket. So you could charge 4 devices just in that little area alone. I think that is absolutely brilliant and definitely makes it again feel like a much more premium car than what the price would suggest. Now, just behind the gear select that, we have got a couple of cup holders here, and they are of a decent size and they are rubber lined as well. The only thing I would mention is if you put a tall bottle of drink in there, yes, we haven't got a manual gear shift, but it can make it a little bit awkward if you want to go from, say, drive to reverse, for example. So that's just something to be aware of. Then underneath the armrest, we've got a bit of additional space, and it has been lined with fabric as well, and it is really handy. And again, for the cost, yes, there are some other cars out there which have more space there, but for the price, you can't complain. And then we have got the glove box, which again is of a decent size, not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. But what I love is that you can get the manual for the car actually on the infotainment system, so it means we haven't got a book in there, so you can actually use the full kind of contents and space of the glove box, which is really handy. So yeah, that's actually everything that, you know, in terms of cubby space here in the ZS, and I'm really happy with it. Now, one thing I have noticed is that there's no space here underneath the center console like there was in the previous generation, but it turns out not many people were actually using it, and it wasn't as handy or as intuitive as how it was first imagined. So I don't mind the fact that MG have got rid of that little cubby space, but if it was something that you would probably miss, let me know in the comments section below. Now, when it comes to physical buttons in the revised ZS, it's pretty much the same as the first generation. So as I mentioned, we've got your shortcut buttons just underneath the infotainment system. Then just behind the wireless charging pad, we have got your 3 kind of battery mode buttons. So the first one is your drive mode button. So you've got Sport, Eco and Normal. Nothing new there. We've got your KERS button, or your kinetic energy regeneration system, i.e. your regen braking. So you can go from 1, 2 or 3, 1 being the weakest, 3 being the strongest. And then we've got a battery button, which if you just give it a knock whilst you're driving, it just lets you know what the current status of your battery level is, and your range as well. So that's quite handy when you're kind of on the move and just want to quickly see what your range is. Then we've got the traditional rotary dial for your gear select, with the big P in the centre there to make it nice and easy once you're parked. Just behind there we have got your auto hold, and we've also got your electric park brake, which I really do like. Then we've got your steering wheel controls, which are exactly the same as they were before. So on the left hand side we've got your media and communication controls, and on the right hand side we've got your driver instrument data controls and also voice activation. And there is a button there where you can kind of select it for what you want, like a special purpose button. So I've just left it on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And then on the right hand side we've just got a little dial there to adjust the wing mirrors, and then we've got your usual buttons there for actually doing the windows themselves. And then we have got a couple of buttons up here, mainly for the sunroof and your lights. And actually I really do like the sunroof on this new revised ZS, because it opens all the way to halfway, where a lot of these kind of sunroofs only open about 60%, which is a little bit annoying. So I really have taken full advantage of that on these sunny days, because definitely summer is coming. Then in front of the steering wheel we have got what looks like one big digital dashboard display, but in fact it's three separate displays. Now the two outer displays are basically rev counters. One's your speedometer and the other one is like a power gauge. If you put your foot down you go straight up to 100%. And then in the center we have got your main digital dashboard display, and that provides you with all your driver data information. And it's actually much clearer than the first generation. I think the revisions are just tidier. There's a lot of information on display, but you very quickly get used to how it's presented, and it is actually really handy and intuitive to read and use whilst you're on the move. So I really do like that feature. But yeah, I am really just impressed with this interior of the updated ZS EV, particularly the infotainment system. And in fact, I invited a friend of mine who owns a first generation ZS EV to come and have a look at the car, and he was mightily impressed by it. So yeah, all in all, I'm really impressed with this update of the ZS EV. And well, before we go sit in the back, I do want to mention we have got one final USB-A socket up here, and that's for dash cameras, and I think that's a really handy feature. Yes, we can now see it on something like a Skoda Octavia, but it was in the MG first. And on that point, I think it's now time we see what it's like in the back. Sat in the back of the ZS EV, it feels very much the same as the previous generation ZS EV. So it is pretty spacious. However, of course, this being a smallish SUV, yes, some taller passengers are not going to be too comfortable in here. Now that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see I've got a good amount of knee room, but headroom is just on the limit there. So if you are over 6 foot tall, you are going to find your head rubbing against the roof lining, or you might have to kind of ick yourself across in order to get it near the sunroof. So that's just something to be aware of. Now when it comes to cubby spaces, it's not too bad back here. We have got some decent sized door pockets, again not lined with any fabric, but you can get a medium to large sized bottle of drink in there. We have got your aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats, and also we've got an armrest with a couple of cup holders, which is really handy, and I do love the fact we've got a little cover for it, so it does mean that you're not going to put your arm in there if you just want to use the armrest as an armrest. So yeah, that's really nice and handy. And as before, we've got some nice decent sized windows. They do open all the way down. We've got a little extra window here in the C-pillar. Okay, it's not really going to do much for visibility, but it allows a little bit more light in. And of course, this being the Trophy Connect, we've also got that sunroof, which does of course make the ZS feel nice, light and airy in here. Now when it comes to kids, I will be honest, you could probably get 3 kids back here. Adults, I would definitely say 2, but when it comes to affixing a child seat, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats, and we have got the metal bars partially exposed, so it should make it relatively easy to affix a child seat. Now when it comes to kind of features back here, well, the main one that we have got is the fact that we have got a USB-A and a USB-C charging input back here, so that was quite surprising to see. I do want to note actually that in the front of the ZS, where you've got your USB-A and USB-C charging inputs, it's the USB-A that allows you to do Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and the USB-C is purely for charging. So that's just something to be aware of on there. But yeah, it's exactly what I was expecting on this revised ZS EV. It is nice and spacious for somebody of my size. If I got somebody next to me, it should be absolutely fine, and I could see myself doing a relatively long trip in the back of the ZS and coming out the other side feeling nice, relaxed and comfortable. But yeah, if you are a little bit taller, I'd probably recommend looking at another EV that's a bit more spacious. However, in this price bracket, you might not find it. And on that note, let's go see what they've done with the boot. Opening the boot on the ZS EV presents you with 470 litres of space, which is actually class leading for this segment of car. It's even a little bit more than the internal combustion engine version of the new ZS. And what I like as well is that there is a little bit of versatility to it. Now, at the moment I've got the boot floor in its highest setting, so we've got hardly any boot lip, so it does mean that you can load some large bulky items in there, and it is nice, wide and square. Now if you do get the seats down, you don't get a completely flat load area, however it does make it a little bit more versatile. But if I lift up the boot floor, you can see we have got your tyre puncture repair kit. We've also got your 2 charging cables that fit snugly underneath the boot floor, which is really handy. And also going with that versatility, I can just lower the boot floor like so we can get any larger, bulkier items into the ZS EV. Now we have got a couple of little netted areas on the side of the boot, so you can put some items in there and they're not going to roll anywhere, but just like its predecessor, well, it's devoid of any features. I mean, we got no tethering hooks, we still have no 12-volt socket. I mean, I'm kind of happy that we have got a boot light, but it's just something I want to see happen for the ZS. I mean, just give it that little bit extra versatility. Also as well, we can't put the partial shelf underneath the boot floor, so that again is something that's a little bit annoying because you've got to leave that at home if you want to put any really large bulky items into the back of the ZS. But other than that, again, for the price, I can forgive MG because this is still a massive boot and it has got an element of versatility to it, especially with the movable floor and the fact that you can get the seats almost flat. But on that note, I think that's enough of looking at the practicality of the ZS EV. Let's see what it's like to drive. Now, when you start driving the new ZS EV, first impressions are really positive. As with the pre-facelift, it feels very comfortable, it feels very quiet and refined, and yeah, it's just a nice, easy car to drive. Again, because this is a smallish SUV, you have got a raised seating position, so I've got a really lovely view of the road ahead. The A-pillars are, yes, quite thick, but I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions. The wing mirrors are of a great size, and they do help with your blind spot, and I have got blind spot monitoring on this car as well. And if I look over my shoulders, yes, there's a relatively thick C-pillar, but again, it doesn't create too much of a blind spot. And as I said, we've got the blind spot monitoring as well. And then rear visibility is actually really good in the ZS as well. You've got a really nice view of the road behind you. So yeah, when you start driving the new ZS EV, it feels just like the old one. I mean, most of the improvements are really with like the infotainment system and the battery upgrades. So you're never really going to feel them initially when you start driving, but it does just feel like a really nice electric car. So yeah, first impressions of the revised ZS EV, very positive. Now when it comes to trim levels in the ZS range, there are 3 to choose from. Now MG have done away with the Excite and the Exclusive, and we now have the entry-level SE, the Trophy, and the top-of-the-range Trophy Connect, which is what I've got here. And very simply, go for the Trophy Connect. Get the top-of-the-range version because you get all the bells and whistles. You get things like wireless charging, 360-degree camera. I mean, things like that are really quite important. And you've also got things like MG Pro Pilot, which is a brilliant all-round safety system. But the other thing as well is essentially there are 6 trim levels to go for because you've got those 3, the SE, Trophy and Trophy Connect, but you can go for them on 2 different battery sizes, and we'll go on to those in a moment. But even if you go for the top-of-the-range Trophy Connect with the bigger battery, you're still looking at around £35,000 for a car that can do a claimed 270 miles of range. Now, I've not been able to get to that full 270 miles. It's actually told me I should get around 250 miles, but that's still really impressive. Don't forget, I've driven cars like the new Audi e-tron. I say new, it's been with us for about 3 years, and that can only do around 248 miles. So this is a huge amount of value for money, even though the price of the ZS EV has gone up, and we are just looking over that £35,000 mark. But it is, as I said, it's still great value for money, and I just do recommend going for the top of the range trim level. Now, I'm not talking about the batteries just yet, that's just the trim level. Now, when it comes to battery choices in the ZS EV range, you've got 2 to choose from. Now, that's the good news, but the great news is the fact now that the entry-level battery, or the smaller battery, is bigger than the pre-facelifted ZS's battery. So with that car, you had a 45.5 kilowatt-hour battery, but now the entry-level battery on the new ZS EV is a 50 kilowatt-hour battery. So already, you're a bit of a winner by just not upgrading to the extended range version. And that's the other thing, we have an extended range version of the ZS EV, and that comes with a 72.6 kilowatt-hour battery, and that's what I've got in this particular car. Now, MG say I should be able to get around 273 miles of range, and I do believe them because I've charged this up to 100% and I got around 260 miles of predicted range. But as I started driving and kind of used the regen buttons and the KERS system, as we all come to know and love on the MG ZS EV model, it does kind of eke up a little bit more in terms of range, and particularly if you do lots of short journeys or, you know, town driving. If you do a lot of long driving and long commutes, then yes, you're not going to get that range out of it, but this is a perfect kind of urban cruiser. It's perfect for towns, perfect for the school run, but yes, having that extended range does mean it comes in very handy for longer journeys. But I'm not going to give any recommendations, because I'm going to ask the question now, which is, if you are considering the new ZS EV and you have the pre-facelifted ZS EV and you've been really happy with it, then you don't really need to go for the extended range version. Just go for the smaller battery, because it's still bigger than the battery you've got now, and it does give more range and more performance. You're looking at just shy of 200 miles range with that 50 kilowatt battery. So that would be my recommendation to you. If you've got the current ZS EV and you're happy with it and you've got no complaints regarding the range and its charging capabilities, then go for the smaller battery version of this new ZS EV. However, now when it comes to charging the new ZS EV, one of the great things about it now, just like the MG5 and the revised version of that car, is you now got the ability to do 100 kilowatt charging, which is something that the ZS really needed. So going from kind of the bottom, now I don't know the figures for a 3-pin charge with the ZS EV, but I'm thinking it's going to be over a day, maybe a day and a half of charging, particularly for the extended range version. But if you use a 7 kilowatt charger, you're looking at around 10 and a half hours to get it from 10 to 100%. If you then plug it into a 50 kilowatt charger, you're then looking at about an hour and 3 minutes to get it up to 100%. And then if you use a 100 kilowatt charger, you're looking at around 42 minutes. Now, if you go for the smaller battery version of the ZS EV, it is actually quicker to reach those 100% marks. Of course, it's a smaller battery, but still, it means you're not really taking too much out of your day in order to charge up the ZS EV if you're doing a massive drive in this car, say several hundred miles or so in a day. Now with the ZS, of course, we got our drive modes. You've got the traditional ones, you've got Eco, Normal and Sport. For most of the time you will be driving around in Normal or Eco, and that way it just kind of holds back the power a little bit. But if you do put it into Sport, you do find that the ZS becomes very nippy and very responsive under your right foot, which is really nice. Now also with these kind of electric cars, you do get your regeneration system, and of course this being the ZS, you got your KERS button, and as I mentioned earlier, that's your kinetic energy regeneration system. They need to come up with a new term or a new name for that. But basically you got 3 levels available, 1, 2 or 3. Now when you got it in its most potent setting, so number 3, the regen system is actually really good. You can take your foot off and you do feel it kick in, and the car starts to slow down. It's not strong enough to kind of be a one pedal system or one pedal driving, but it will take a good chunk of braking out of your daily drive, and you will get used to it quite quickly. If however you want to put it into 1, then this thing will coast like a dream. And if you're kind of on a daily commute, or you're on a road where you can see far into the distance and perhaps you're on a little bit of a slope, you can put it into 1, take your foot off the accelerator pedal and just let the car coast its way to the end. But the only other thing I will mention actually is that the brake pedal hasn't got the best amount of feel to it. In fact, you do have to put your foot quite far down, particularly if you want to do some kind of heavy braking. And again, I've noticed that with the KERS system or the regen system being in its strongest setting, and I've just needed to kind of put my input there just to finish off that slowing down. So that's just one thing I've noticed with the ZS EV. It's not a terrible thing, but there are cars out there we go, where you just got to kind of, you don't have to put that much effort into the braking in order to slow the car down. But again, like I said, for everyday driving, particularly driving around town and things like that, you'll have no issues whatsoever. So what's the ride, refinement and handling like in this new ZS EV? Well, just like its predecessor, it's a very good all-round car. So when it comes to the ride, it deals with the bumps and imperfections really well. As I mentioned earlier, I was surprised that the alloy wheels on here are still 17 inches. They appear bigger on the car. I think that's just the design of them. But it deals with the bumps and imperfections really well. Yes, you do get some of the booms and vibrations coming into the cabin, a little bit more so than some other premium EVs out there, but then again, that's to be expected. And what I found as well is that even if you do go over some potholes or manhole covers, yes, you get that boom, you get that vibration, but the seats have actually got a lot of cushioning in them, and they do absorb some of the vibration, which is really quite nice. So it does mean that the ZS EV can be a really nice long distance cruiser, and with that 100 kilowatt charging capability, it means you can cover a great distance in one day and come out the other side still feeling pretty relaxed and, you know, feeling as though you've not done a massively long journey. So yeah, that's something I really do like about this new version to it. And also I think because of this one having the larger battery, it does seem to deal with those bumps and imperfections, I think, a little bit better than the pre-facelifted version. And I've gone over kind of a couple of crests and some level crossings, and there's not as much body float as I was expecting. It does settle down very quickly, but I would be keen to try out the 50 kilowatt version of the ZS EV to see what that's like, going over the same kind of roads and the crests, as I said, the level crossings, to see if it has that little bit of body float still there, or if it does kind of settle itself very quickly. But it's not uncomfortable, it's not going to give you any kind of motion sickness or anything like that. So yeah, the ride is very, very good. I am very impressed by it, and like I said, yes, if you want to go for a more comfortable car, like something like an Ioniq 5, then by all means, but you do have to pay for it. That's the thing. And next comes the Refinement, and really the main intrusion into the cabin is a bit of tyre roar, particularly if you're driving on a poor road surface. Now, if I am driving at speed, particularly say on an A road or the motorway, there is a little bit of wind noise coming off the A pillar and the wing mirror, but it's not too intrusive. Actually, something I'm very impressed with is the stereo in this ZS EV. I don't think it's a named brand, I think it's kind of like their own system, but it's got a good amount of bass to it. It's got some nice kind of sound to it, you know. I can play my tunes and I don't feel it's distorted, and I don't feel I'm getting any kind of echoey feedback or anything like that. So it does mean that if you are doing a long journey with the family and perhaps you do want to have your music playing, then that's a really nice feature to have. It does take away, again, some of the noises, you know, you would expect to hear coming into your EV car. But if you're going to be driving with no music, and perhaps, you know, I don't know, you're doing a review, or you've got somebody sat next to you and having a conversation, you may hear just a little bit of tyre noise on a poor road surface and a little bit of wind noise off the A-pillar and wing mirror. But other than that, no, I'm still absolutely fine. For the price, it's a very refined cruiser. So what about the ZS's handling? Well, just like the pre-facelifted version, which I thought was absolutely fine, the same can be said for this facelifted version. There's a little bit of weight in the steering. I'll be honest, it doesn't give you the hugest amount of feedback. It's, you know, it doesn't feel like you're in a video game, however. It's just the fact of it's perfect for everyday driving. And there's a nice bit of weight, though, in the steering, so it does feel like there's a little bit of a connection to those front wheels. And also, the one thing about the ZS EV is that it feels nippy. I can't believe I'm saying that about an electric car that weighs just over 1,500 kilos, but it does. It actually feels agile. You can kind of change direction quite quickly. Now, yes, there is a little bit of roll and lean in the corners, so just be aware of that. And if you do push it, particularly in damp conditions, you will feel the ZS start to understeer, because don't forget, this is front wheel drive. Just like the pre-facelift, it's good, great for everyday driving. Don't expect it to be the most fun car out there, because it will understeer, it will roll and lean in the corners, but for everyday driving, you'll have no problems with it, whether it be on a twisty B road or parking at the supermarket car park. So what have been some of the highlights and some of the low points that I've experienced living with the ZS EV this week? Well, high points have definitely been the comfort. I do a 52-mile round trip on my commute to work, and this has been really comfortable and relaxing. I know I'm driving on kind of a bobbly B road at the moment, but I don't feel uncomfortable on it, and it's actually been really nice and relaxing to just be able to drive, put on the adaptive cruise control and just let the car do its thing. I also really like the sunroof as well. I mean, yes, a lot of cars have sunroofs, but when this first section opens up and goes back, usually they open up about 60-70% of the way, and you always have this little overhang. I know it's only a tiny thing, but this actually opens all the way, so you've got the whole front half of the sunroof open, which is really lovely. And I actually like the fact that it has got a little bit of polarization in there, so even on a sunny day like today where the sun is out in all its glory, I don't feel like the top of my head is getting sunburnt, because, you know, it's very exposed. So that's another feature I really do like. Now, going back to the adaptive cruise control and the safety systems of that MG Pro Pilot system, I have found one little kind of negative on there, and it's something I found. It's doing it right now, by the way. It's with the lane keep assist, and I've put it in its most relaxed setting, but every so often as I'm driving along, even on a straight road, you'll get these little jerks just coming into the steering. Now, it's not enough to kind of throw you off the road or anything like that, but it's kind of just being a little bit oversensitive. It kind of sees you're getting within 2 foot of the white line and kind of gives you a little nudge back into the centre of your lane. It's great that it's a safety system that does it, but it feels a little bit intrusive when you're trying to have a relaxing drive and you just get that little jolt in the steering, which is not inputted by yourself. So that's just something to be aware of there with that safety system. But that's actually the only negative I've got with it. It does come up with the emergency stop if it needs to engage it, but other than that, for day-to-day driving, as I've mentioned, this is an absolutely brilliant car. So everyone, what are my thoughts on the new MG ZS EV LR? I mean, long range. Well, I'm hugely impressed by it. The cabin, yes, you still got your bits of hard plastic, but every time I get into a ZS, it just seems to be there's a little bit less and less of hard plastic on display. The next generation, I'm expecting to have soft touch plastic on the doors, which would be really lovely. But for what you get, and now with the range that you get and the charging capability for the price, this is a win-win. If you're after an EV, or if you're after an SUV that's an EV for under £40,000 with nearly 300 miles range or over 250 miles range, this is an absolute winner. You can't go wrong. The boot is big as well, and it is actually just perfect for families. If you want to do any long distance cruising or long distance journeys, you can do. And now with that 100 charging capability, it's just there for you. It just really does help out. MG are just on and up at the moment. They just keep moving forward, but they don't have to do too much. This car has got all the safety features that you'd want. It's got all the comfort features that you'd want. And we now have the range and charging capabilities for the price that you want as well. I think MG are going to have another massive winner with this. And later on in 2022, we've got the revised version of the MG5, which looks stunning. And we've also got a brand new car coming from MG, and at the moment it's only kind of in camouflage. Now it could be the MG4, or it could be given a brand new name. We don't know yet, but if that's a car that's the size of a Ford Focus or maybe even a Ford Fiesta, and even has the 50 kilowatt hour battery in it, MG are going to be on a roll. There are going to be waiting lists for MG cars probably going into 10-12 months. And that's an amazing thing to see happen. I really do like this car. Yes, as I said, it's not perfect. I mean, I have got a little bit of a dash rattle, I know, just kind of rearing its ugly head there. But that's the sacrifice I'm willing to have on a car, on this much car, for the money. So yeah, I really do love this revised ZS EV. I love the looks, exterior and interior. The infotainment system is a massive update. And just all over, it's a really good electric car. It's not the best for obvious reasons, but for the money, you can't go wrong. And you've also got a 7-year manufacturer's warranty. I mean, what else is there to say? Keep it up, MG. Keep it up. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the revised MG ZS EV LR long range extended range. As always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. Of course, if you've got any questions on the MG ZS EV and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. I'm of course on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter and all that social media and that lot, so don't forget to follow on there. But guys, have yourselves a great day, have yourselves a great week and a weekend, and I will see you all in the next video. So take care everybody, and bye-bye. So I'm actually really impressed with the fact that we've got that
school zone in 400 feet.
Apparently there's a school zone in 400 feet. Yes it is, but it's a Sunday, and we don't really do Sunday school here in the UK. But anyway, carrying on.